So this starts with a confession. I'm a geek. I admit that freely. So that's my first confession. Marketing did not want my slides. They do not like my slides. They never asked for my slides. So we don't have slides. Second, I'll tell you that I work with a lot of people in the Deep South with very short attention spans. Sales reps who have, let's say, more fingers than teeth. So I've learned to speak in things quite simply in threes, and I'll try to stick with that. There are three things that drove me to come here that I found I could not do in Sims, that I really started to believe were essential that we start to solve. One is that users are going to do stupid things. No matter what I do, the power of stupidity compels my user to do dumb things. They download free malware with purchase left, right, and center. They click on spam. No matter what I do, they will continue to do stupid things. Number two, I will never have enough information about the network I've got to protect. No matter who I ask, nobody seems to know who the users are in any given department or what that machine's supposed to do. So those are fundamentals that I got to start with. And the third is that I need something smart enough to learn what the hell's going on out there, because I'm not smart enough to do that. I work with a lot of people with few teeth, so I've kind of dumbed down over the years. So those are basics. Now, what I want to do tonight is hopefully teach you kind of what I do in a use case workshop, because I believe there are also 3 basic patterns for SIM rules and 3 basic patterns for UEBA rules. And what we can do is apply those to really cool and different use cases. So one of them, and I'll try to give you specific customer examples, is with a large energy customer not too far from here who asked me to do a big project, and we started, and they said, yeah, we have 3 ingress sources from the internet. Only 3 ways in and out to the internet. So we use a product like Lumeta. We start doing a discovery. How many ways are there out from the internet? Well, we found 9 in the first 30 minutes. They knew about 3. So this goes back to the problem of I don't know what I'm protecting. They ask us to protect this stuff, and we don't know what we're protecting, which is where a product like Lumeta comes into play to find what are the paths in and out of the network that I don't even know about, and help me start doing predictive things, which is really useful. The other is that stuff is going to go on in my network that I don't want. And my 3 basic rules as I start looking at use cases for a CASB product with my friends at Okta is user did something they've never done. Different, weird, or different than others like them. Those are my 3 basic use cases. They logged in from an IP address they've never used. They did something they've never done. They executed an application they've never done. And they did something weird that nobody else like them has done. Those are my 3 basic use cases. I can apply that to anything. So what I start doing, the only thing I'm really good at is use case workshops for security. I've been doing this for 15 years, and it's about what do you do with this stuff? I'm a security practitioner. I have to go find out what to do with this. So I take partner logs, like Okta CASB logs, and I go, cool, the user logged in from an IP address they've never done to an application they've never used and did a transaction that nobody else in their department has ever done. Okay, that's really interesting. I start looking at Lumeta and I start looking at data that tells me, well, you know what? There's a way in and out of this network that's never happened before. Or when I ask them, what are their top applications? And we did this over and over again with, let's say, a large insurance company on the East Coast. And they told us we have 10 applications that are on the internet. We only have 10 cloud apps. We do a discovery. There are 52 cloud apps. They don't even know what they don't know. That's where machine learning comes into play, because most of the time, we don't know jack about our networks. We are told as security professionals, here's the 50,000 IPs you got to protect. And here's the 5,000 user population you got to protect. What do I even look for? I spend a lot of time dealing with that. Now I've got 3 experts on the panel, and Derek, to my direct left, is one of the top guys on performance testing you'll ever meet. If you want to know anything about Hadoop or how to make Securonics sing or how to make Hadoop sing, he's the guy I go to. And he can tell you all kinds of things about that. Then I've got my friends from Okta and from Lumeta. If you want to learn how to discover what your network's really doing, rather than what they told you it's supposed to be doing, Lumeta can help you with that. If you want to know what's happening in shadow IT and what your cloud applications are doing and what your users are doing, now I can go to Okta and I can actually watch and see what's going on. And I'll let them introduce themselves now, and then we'll let you guys ask questions, because really what I want to do is the one thing I'm good at is teaching use cases. And I said there are 3 basics. In the SIM world, everything counts in large amounts. Lots of firewall drops, that IP is interesting. Lots of failed logins, that IP address is interesting. The second rule says user did something known bad. I've got a terminated user in the network. It's a basic rule comparison. User went to a bad IP address that's known evil. Enrichment. And the third rule says success after fails. Lots of failed logins followed by success. It's an oldie but a goodie. Lots of failed ATM transactions or credit card transactions followed by a success. That one's usually pretty darn interesting. It's an oldie but a goodie. We don't get to throw out SIMs. I did ArcSight and QRadar and Nitro and every SIM under the planet. Sorry, started to use a special adjective because I just have that love for them. And those are the same basic rules that we've got to implement. We still do those in Secure Onyx. Those are the starting point. That's table stakes. And then you do the 3 UEBA rules. User did something they've never done. They logged in to an application from an IP address they've never used. They executed a transaction they've never done. And then they did it in a quantity that they've never done. Those are the 3 basics. And you can apply that to just about anything. So where your trick comes into play and where we become, what people want to learn out of these things is what are the tricks to being successful? And one of them you've probably heard, hopefully a few times, is give me the right log source. Give me the log source that's important to your network. Where is your intellectual property? Where are the files that matter? Where's your customer data? Where's your PHI data? Give me that, and I can now start protecting the applications and the data, not just the machine from malware. All right, so I'm going to pass it to my Derek. Let you start.
Thanks, David. So my name is Derek Harsey. I'm the chief architect at Secure Onyx, and we've spent the last many years building a resilient platform that's scalable and kind of took away the boundaries that really challenged us in the previous architectures around the rate of ingestion and the amount of data that we can retain. With partners like Cloudera, we were able to solve those problems with a fundamental architecture. We maintain reference architectures and security standards. But there's a third major consideration that really is top of mind today, and that's as we move to the cloud in the last year, we started to see very rapid adoption. As Mel said, not just rapid adoption, but rapid adoption from very large customers. And the issue that my team on the architecture side and my team of Hadoop administrators and now a third part of the organization around operations management in the cloud has to worry about is not just the rate of ingestion and the amount of data that we're going to retain over time and make sure the platform can scale to those rates, but now it's really worrying about cost effectiveness of the cloud. When we look at the overall cost structure of the cloud architecture, we're seeing more than 50% of the costs are just in how much storage we need to retain. So we need to look at smarter ways to make sure we know exactly how much data we're retaining, and we have very advanced tiered data strategies where we can make sure that we retain just the amount of data that's required to support the business. So those are the types of things that are top of mind and why we're maturing at a very rapid pace to ensure that we can not just meet the business requirements, but also do it in a very cost-effective way where you can get to this solution's value very quickly in the cloud. I'll turn it over to you.
Great. Stephen Lee, I'm with Okta. I'm Senior Director of Business Development and Partner Solutions at Okta. Happy to be up here on with this panel. I spent 8 years with Okta, have seen sort of the evolution of people moving into the cloud. Before Okta, I happened to spend quite a few number of years at another company that starts with a big O. It's not hard to guess. But I've been doing identity for a long time, and it's been a very interesting journey to see, the evolution and how people are moving, and it doesn't matter what you call it, right? Whether it's digital transformation or lift and shift or whatever you're going through. I think a lot of the problems that Secure Onyx is trying to solve is real, and whether you buy it or not, this term of SIEM 2.0 is real, because we've seen people doing things and when they feel like they have control of the data from all the different sources, just because you have them all in one place doesn't mean you know what you're doing with it. And I think that there's a really important message here to kind of take everything to the next step when the horsepower of the systems, the horsepower of the software, the horsepower of the vendor that you work with, they're able to do more. And you need to sort of expect a little bit more. And that's something I want to obviously, hopefully be able to share a little bit with you guys tonight, because I think that's important. I think sometimes for a lot of customers, the problem they run into is they think they know what they're supposed to do, but you only know what you know. And there are a lot of vendors out there like Securonics where they're doing stuff that you're not familiar with and you don't know. And it really has the ability to take you to that next level. So happy to be on this panel and happy to talk for the next 30 minutes. Hand it over to you.
Thanks. So my name is Joe Sorial. I am VP of Product/Business Development at Lumeta. You may know Lumeta as the vendor of IP Sonar, which was our legacy product. Came back from the internet, the beginning of the internet days, where we were crawling the internet and providing maps as it was growing and changing, mostly for U.S. government. Recently, we introduced a new product within the last few years called Lumeta Spectre, focused on real-time situational awareness. So the idea there is you want to understand your network, you want to understand your endpoint, and that's easier said than done. As you guys are probably aware, things have changed from back in the day when things were just in a data center in a closet and everybody had desktop computers. Now we're looking at, obviously, started with virtualization and the move to cloud. And I think someone mentioned it earlier that these things are changing over time. You no longer are in control of the infrastructure. So understanding what assets are out there and how they're operating and behaving becomes murky and becomes hard to get your arms around. And then you roll in things like IoT and IP-enabled devices that traditionally weren't IP-enabled, and the problem becomes much more dynamic with a lot of changes. And it's hard to secure things that you don't know about. It's hard to monitor things and do the types of collection and PCAP that you need to do with that ever-changing, ever-evolving infrastructure. So, the question is, well, so what? When you look at next-gen SIM products that have UEBA functionality, where we focus on is that E component, that entity, and how it's changing, how it's morphing, how it's changing your threat posture, your attack surface, and giving users and security analysts the situational awareness of what's going out there so that they can react in real time, and products like Securonics can alert and provide the important alerts and notifications that they need to based on how these things are changing and behaving. Deviations from anomalies, being able to traverse to the internet or an unprotected enclave, for example. These are real life use cases, real life issues that we need to be aware of and provide visibility into.
So I'm going to go back and I'm going to ask each of the panelists to kind of suggest some use cases that will use the type of data you collect that would be most beneficial. I believe we've kind of got to go through a crawl, walk, run evolution. There are a lot of rule-based things that haven't even been done in the existing SIMs that we can do to start crawling. And then there are things we can do to start walking as we start looking for land speed violations where somebody logs in from 2 IPs and weird geolocations. And then we can really get to the run stage where we're pulling that key application and looking for the user to execute something they've never done with a dollar transaction amount or a customer amount that tells me they're doing more unique records. And I'm going to start with Derek, and I'm going to ask for a couple of things because there are a couple areas that I think are pretty cool that directly relate to our other panelists. One of them is we start doing step-up authentication. We've started dealing with customers we're actually dealing with, instead of insiders, the external customers coming in. And there were some things we had to do on the architecture that were pretty interesting to start playing with Solar for indexing and Redis for in-memory transactions and comparisons to be able to do some of these things in real time, to take Okta and start pulling in data that says this user just tried to log in from someplace weird. What else should we do? Well, maybe we need to ask some more authentication questions because they're doing it from someplace they've never done. Derek, anything you would like to share that you think is relevant?
Well, rather than getting into individual use cases, I want to talk a little bit about just the way that we can seamlessly aggregate data into a consistent and rationalized platform. You mentioned the shadow IT issue of organizations having disparate data. What's important for us is that we can bring any type of data in a very efficient and secure manner, whether it be cloud to cloud or on-premise data to cloud or a global-based deployment where we need to bring in all of the log sources. So, I want to focus on the platform rather than individual use case, because if we don't get the data in a secure way into a single environment, then we can't really look at those advanced use cases. But, what we really try to do is make sure it's easy to collect all the data of any type. We do encryption and compression of the data of about 90%, so that the data that gets sent into a centralized location in the cloud is not only secure, but it's also sending the data at a very much smaller rate than would be traditionally sent over log sources like syslog and so on. So it's important that we can very quickly aggregate all the data and bring it seamlessly. Tanuj mentioned the cloud connectors. There's a very heavy focus on cloud-to-cloud-based connectors, bringing in data from all the cloud-based sources. And then once we have that comprehensive view of all the users and the entities, then we can start applying any of the use cases. And part of the value add here, rather than again focusing on an individual use case, the value of the platform is that the platform enables us to configure the analytics in any way that you choose to. Tanuj mentioned the new innovation around the traffic analyzer. The traffic analyzer is just an application that's taking advantage of the platform, and now that the data is there, we can take advantage of finding threats in new ways, putting together those threats in a chain of events or a threat model that allows us to elevate the risk and sift through oceans of data that we wouldn't be able to do previously because of the limitations of scale that I talked about earlier. So really that's the real value add, in my view, is the security analytics platform that we provide allows you to innovate where your business needs to apply either transactional fraud, behavioral analytics, or the traditional security use cases to find really advanced ways to meet your security objectives.
Okay, and how about from the Okta side?
Yeah, so David, you and I talked about this, right? I think when you look at how somebody should approach this problem, and this is a horrible example, but I got a speeding ticket about a couple months ago, and there was a cop. Clearly, he knew where people would normally speed, and he was there just waiting for me to blast past 40 miles an hour, and he gave me a ticket. In a way, as someone that's implementing an identity system, you need to understand, and I always use this word, like people talk about life cycle of things, and I always feel like it's a very important thing to understand. You need to know you need to have a good understanding of sort of the overall life cycle of the users, life cycle of how things are being granted to the users, and life cycle of how they're accessing stuff. And you can't just look at, implementing certain policies and just hope that it'll work, right? Because every environment is different, every environment is custom. But once you understand the life cycle of, let's say, an end user, right? How they come into being, if this is an enterprise use case, you're talking about someone coming through HR, being granted a bunch of access. Maybe this person is remote and he or she is accessing stuff through the iPad. Maybe there's an EMM in place because there are managed devices. Maybe there's device trust, device posturing. Once you understand that whole piece, then you start building stuff around that, right? And I think when you understand that and couple that with sort of the power of a platform like Securonics, when you've got something that's built on top of sort of all the goodness of modern technology, right? Stuff like, the entire Apache stack, the Spark, the Impala, the Hadoop stack. You realize that it's a very powerful thing for you to look for anomalies and look for patterns. And it's always going to be an evolution, right? And like I said earlier, you don't know what you don't know. But when you take a step back and try to just understand how things are being granted, and then you couple with that with a platform like this, you can really do a whole lot. I think a lot of the problems I see with people is they jump in, they sort of know, hey, I think I have this problem. Let me just get this product. Let me just implement whatever is there and just hope that I'm going to start seeing stuff. You're not going to get that, right? I think there's a deeper, so there's just a little bit of a thought process you have to go through to understand what is the life cycle of the access control, the access granting, the end users, and maybe to some extent, for some of you guys, maybe it's beyond just human. Maybe there's IoT and all that kind of stuff involved. But you need to have some idea of how all that stuff works. And then you put in sort of the enforcement with something like a Securonics, and it is extremely powerful. And again, like I said, I've seen people sort of failing with it, but I think you need to take a step back to have an understanding of what is going on within your enterprise, whether it's with employees or with consumers or external users or partners, and the power of a platform like Securonics can be very useful. And that's sort of one of the biggest piece of advice whenever I work with customers is, hey, don't just think you buy something and you just put it there and it's going to work. It does take a little bit of homework, but if you do your homework, it's going to be tremendous, right? And especially if you have a platform like Securonics where you can actually do a lot of stuff and really do a lot of stuff that's beyond just your traditional SIEM where you're just building very static and simple policies, but you have AI, you have UEBA, and it's going to teach you some stuff, but you need to do a little bit of homework up front.
Can I suggest a couple of use cases that are pretty easy with the Okta data for the crawl and walk stage, right? How about identifying any terminated user who's active in your network? Kaiser Permanente was breached last year. Tata was fined $1.7 billion for continuing to access over 10,000 customer records in Epic medical data. That's an easy one, right? If I have the authentication events and I have the identity data, how about any terminated user still live in my network?
Yeah, I mean, that's one example, right? Even very simple things. You think, like, I use this phrase, we talk about the Superman use case, right? Someone logging in from a certain IP and another one within a certain time frame where it's physically impossible. You would think that's kind of it's kind of a good POC thing. You'd be surprised how often that happens when someone's logging in from London and then somebody logs in from APAC within a span of like half hour, and you're like, how the hell did that happen, right? So there are a lot of these very simple things, and if you think through it, you'd actually see a lot, and it's actually a pretty amazing thing when we work with our customers too, when they try to implement some of these things, and you see how much noise they actually get. It's pretty remarkable.
Well, what we're finding is some of those simple use cases, and had a discussion, if you haven't met with your TAM, our project management team led by Vincent Bodner, Vinny was talking about, we keep finding a lot of basic things that provide value pretty quickly. An activity by a terminated user is a good, easy win. Yep. Take the easy ones, and then build to the advanced and the interesting ones. How about just something like, I've got a user account that's active in my network that my identity tool, my CASB, my IAM provisioning tool doesn't even know about. A rogue account. How about we disable that before it gets misused? So there are a lot of basic ones, and I wanted to at least bring up some of these in case you're not using them, because these are easy early wins. And we want to have a few of those interspersed with the interesting stuff. All right, from Lumeta, what would you suggest?
Yeah, I like the crawl, walk, run framework. I think it kind of puts things in perspective in terms of the maturity as you roll out. So, for us, crawl is just understanding, the network, the endpoints, your cloud infrastructure. And, in terms of easy win, typically when we have a customer engagement, we end up finding about 40% more things out there, whether it's network gear or endpoints that the customer really didn't know about. And that's the easy one. That's the low-hanging fruit. From there, you can do your monitoring, do your proper hygiene around security, and make sure that everything is trued up and being managed appropriately. The run is when you start looking, or I'm sorry, the walk is when you start looking at, okay, now that I understand the whole of my network, well, how is my, I don't want to say perimeter anymore because that's kind of a dead term, but how is my edge changing? Are there any leak paths that are going in and out of my network? So that's, easy win. It's a little bit more sophisticated, but that falls into this is something that I need to address quickly. Is everything, you mentioned the 3 routes that you know of in and out of my network, well, are there more than that? And being able to monitor that in real time. I'd say that's in the borderline, kind of a fast jog kind of category in terms of, just back to basics things that you need to understand and monitor for. And then I think run is where a Securonics platform comes in. This is where all of that data is going into a central repository, all the intelligence and analytics is being applied, and you start layering on other sources of information, whether it's identity, for example, whether it's other solutions in the ecosystem, and now you're really looking at trends. You're looking at the full UEBA stack and making sure that you understand everything that's going on. So I would quantify the life cycle of visibility, understand it. Chances are, our users and our prospects do not until there's a solution in place to do that, and that's both from the user perspective as well as the entity perspective. From there, you want to monitor regular basis, understand that, how is that stuff behaving over time, and then put all of that into a platform like Securonics and apply all of the intelligence around it.
So I'd suggest a couple of early easy wins with Lumeta style data. Number one, any port below 1024 should be a trusted port. They're well-known ports, they're well-known applications. Port 21, insecure traffic. Port 23, insecure traffic, FTP or telnet traffic. I should never have insecure traffic coming from a secure site to an external site. Easy stuff. When I see that this is happening on a device that NIST 853 says I'm supposed to harden, isn't supposed to do that crap. It's supposed to be dedicated to one port and one application. Let's get them off those network. Let's turn those services off. Let's reduce the exposed surface area that they can attack. The other one I'll suggest from a large retailer that I worked with that had a multi-million-dollar breach, if I see any database ports, as I start seeing any Oracle applications or any MySQL applications communicating with anything externally, not supposed to happen. And what we find a lot of times is there are databases that somebody's tacked up that they didn't bother to secure that maybe we just need to get off the network and move that off the network. So those are early, easy wins. This stuff doesn't all have to be crazy hard. There are lots of early, easy wins we can get that we can intersperse along the way. And hopefully you can take a couple of those away tonight. So I wanted to introduce you to a couple of our partners, our great sponsors tonight, and give you some ideas on how we can use that data and how it can be really useful as we start trying to secure the enterprise. So thank you guys. Anything
Thank you.
you'd like to add? Any